your life. You got this. Go chase it. Live your life. Enlighten you. Let the light shine through. Let enlighten you. Just see it through.
Hello, everyone. It's November 2023. I'm Melissa Thrasher.
And I'm Lolita Cummings.
Welcome to Enlighten U, Eastern Michigan University's podcast for students.
Today, we're going to talk about alcoholism. In 2022, 71% of undergraduate students said they had already taken their first drink. So when I say Blackout Wednesday, most of you already know what I'm talking about. But for those of you who don't, it is one of the biggest drinking days of the year, the day before Thanksgiving. Why? Because you're off from school, you have a break, friends come home, you go home, and it's time to hit the bars.
To talk about drinking and the impact it can have on you and your life, Chrissie Zavicar is here to share her story. Chrissie is an alum of EMU who started drinking in high school, but really ramped it up while she was here. She's sober now, but for 20 years, alcohol was a major character in her life's journey. It's an empowering one, and she's here to share every detail. We also have Dr. Brenna Breshears, who's an assistant professor of clinical mental health here at EMU. She's also a licensed professional counselor who specializes in substance abuse. Welcome Chrissie and Dr. Breshears to the show.
Welcome to Enlighten You, Chrissie and Dr. Breshears.
Thank you.
So happy to have you.
Thanks.
Chrissie, we're going to start with you. I've read your First and Sober newsletter, and I absolutely love it. It's on LinkedIn. Is it anywhere else?
It is on LinkedIn right now. Thinking about migrating it, but for right now, yes, just on LinkedIn.
It's really good, so I encourage everyone to read it. But I read in there that you actually started drinking when you were a sophomore in high school.
Yes.
And then it escalated when you were here in college.
Yes.
And I knew you here, and I never detected anything. But can you tell us about your journey? Tell us your story.
Oh, goodness. It's a long story. I would say that I really got into drinking more as a curiosity. I think that's one of the things that might be a myth is that you drink because of the alcohol. And it's more that you uncover kind of this amazing feeling that you get when you first drink. You know, I read Matthew Perry's memoir. I've read quite a few memoirs of people who had alcohol and drug addiction, and they talk about the moment that they fell in love with this feeling of just, you're finally calm. It finally calms your nervous system. It calms down this anxiety that you have. And so when I first started drinking, ironically, it wasn't a great situation. I think the first night I started drinking, I did something that I regretted the next day, and it ended up putting me on blast with my peers, and it was horrible. So it was like a now and then thing. And then when I got to college, I had some things happen prior to coming to school. And what ultimately happened here was that I would drink, and it was like pouring gasoline on a fire. I would get really, really angry. I mean, I had a lot of things that were deep-rooted, deep-seated, but it was just my way of coping. And to quickly skim over it, got through college, became a professional. I have a lot of opinions about drinking in the professional world because it can really hurt your reputation. It can really hurt a lot of things, especially when you're a 20-something and you're coming from childhood, basically. And, there might be pressure to drink, and then you can end up, your inhibitions are lowered and your professionalism is impacted. But fast forward, then I got married, had some children, and it ultimately became where it was more of a calming myself down at the end of the day, just having wine at the end of the day, was not binge drinking. But at the same time, it was still a crutch, and it was still being used as a medicinal tool. And so it ultimately came to a head where I decided it was time to quit. And I've been sober since June of 2017. And ultimately that's when the healing begins, is when you remove the substance. So it's been an emotional 6.5 years. But yeah, so that's kind of the top level.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you got to that point where you recognized that you wanted to change. So that's beautiful. Great story.
So, Dr. Breshears, can I call you Brenna?
Yes, please.
Oh, great, great. So, just listening to what Chrissie had mentioned about the curiosity of alcoholism, why is it so prevalent, especially among young people? Because Chrissie mentioned that she started in high school. Why? Why do they start in high school, and why is it prevalent among college students as well?
I think with everything, there's a lot of reasons, right? It's a nuanced conversation. But what I'm hearing when Chrissie, you share your story, is this very common idea of feeling calm for the first time. When I work with people who are experiencing substance use issues as adults, a lot of times we can trace it back to younger than sophomore, right? Maybe 10, 11, 12 years old. We have these conversations about, genetics versus environment. I think as usual, it's both. But for a lot of people, it's a coping skill that started and it's escalating. So I used to use it when I was 12, 13, 14, 15, and now I'm 22, 21. I'm experiencing this new kind of stress, this new kind of anxiety, depression is a lot of time, right? And like you said, can be these underlying things. But if you learn how to calm yourself down, and then you don't learn any other ways to calm yourself down, then why would we expect that to change?
Right. And does the person need to recognize that they want to change? Like in Chrissie's instance, she recognized that it was time. I need to.
Yeah, I think that was another thing that, I was thinking about when you were sharing your story is there is this myth that it's rock bottom, that everybody has to hit rock bottom before they want to change. I don't think that is true. I think that it can be a set of circumstance that becomes so overwhelming. You lose relationships, you lose jobs, you lose, money, whatever it may be. And you kind of have this reckoning, but it can also be, what is my relationship with the substance? And what is that relationship keeping me from experiencing? So it can, again, counseling students, we hate it, right? But it depends is often an answer because it is a complicated question. One thing I would add is that when we're talking about, migrating from, let's say, middle school, high school, college, I think another piece of that conversation is that we go in a very, we don't do a lot of harm reduction in middle school and high school, right? We do a lot of abstinence. So DARE, for example, which statistically has not worked well. If we look at studies, we can see that DARE does not work very well. And I think the problem a lot of the times is when you tell a 10-year-old that cannabis and heroin are the same thing, and then they go and they try cannabis, then maybe they don't believe you about the heroin.
Oh, that's a really good point.
So I think this idea of harm reduction versus abstinence is like a big piece of that conversation in terms of why use escalates.
That's interesting. Brenna mentioned a couple of things that I want to double back with you on. And one of them was that, not everyone hits rock bottom, but it's kind of like a cumulative effect and realizing what it's doing in relationships. What was that like for you? Question number one. Two parts. Another thing that you said that I thought was quite interesting is that sometimes there are underlying factors with the alcoholism, anxiety being one of them. Was that something that you dealt with? And what was that like?
I'll start with that. I don't know, you can't know everybody's experience, but, I think you'd probably be able to speak to it more, but I think that everybody who has addiction has nothing to do with the substance. It has to do with what the substance is alleviating for you. Yes. And so you're going to have an underlying issue. It's one of those things I read a book called Drinking a Love Story. And she says that a serving of alcohol is, one glass of wine or, one beer or whatever it is. And if your answer to that is, well, then what's the point? You don't have a healthy relationship with alcohol because it's not to get drunk. You're not supposed to be inebriated. That's not the point. Or it makes it to where maybe you do have an unhealthy relationship. Rock bottom. So as somebody who's experienced addiction and based on, people that I speak to as well who have been in the same space, it's a long crescendo. It's not like one day, usually you just wake up and you're like, oh, okay, this sounds like a great idea. say listen to the quiet voice. There's a quiet voice in there that's poking you and you know it's not okay. But for example, I would even think to myself, okay, I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm not quitting right now. I'm just not doing it. And it gets to the point where you go, the benefit is not worth it. Even if, I mean, I use the term benefit loosely because, you know, you talk about alleviating anxiety, it exacerbates anxiety. It makes it worse. So as much as you might think it's helping, it's actually, like I said, putting fuel on a fire.
Did you know that when at the time?
No, I don't think that I did. I was shocked by how much the anxiety lowered. But I mean, I was on what you'd call perpetual anxiety loop. So you wake up in the morning, you feel kind of groggy, you don't feel great. I would struggle with focus and productivity during the day because I was kind of foggy. And like I said, I wasn't getting drunk. I was just leveraging the substance. And so I would go through and I'd be like, I am never drinking again. Not happening. And then the day starts to creep on. And then by 3, it's like, all right, what time do I get to drink? And then it just starts all over again. And it's just this cycle. And it just wears you down. And ultimately, there were enough tipping points for me. It really was something's going to happen where you hurt somebody, you lose your children. There's something you can't repair. And that's ultimately what pushed me to make a change. And it was almost like I had these spiritual guides. It was like all these different things came and compounded at once, where these messages started hitting me. And that's when it was time.
So was it just spiritual guys that was hitting you, or did you have someone in your life who was saying, you know, Chrissie, I can see things in you, or, you know, or was it just that inside voice of yourself?
Well, that's what's interesting, and I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. People have come up to me and said, I'm so sorry. I noticed and I never said anything. I was like, honey, I would not have done a darn thing. You could tell me and it just would have made me defensive and I probably just wouldn't have spoken to you. Okay. So I think that you really have to come to it on your own. But what has driven me to want to share is that what ultimately pushed me to make a change was Mel Robbins. I don't know if you know her. So she has this book called The 5-Second Rule. Interestingly enough, I've never gotten past the first chapter because I was listening to it while I was running, and she actually talked about when she was going through a major stress, like they lost their jobs, they were, financially struggling, all these different things. And she talked about how she was using alcohol to calm herself down at the end of the night. I had never heard somebody actually acknowledge that they were doing that. And I was so ashamed whether I recognized it or not. And I didn't want to tell anybody because then they might try to hold me accountable. And so for me to hear somebody that I didn't have to speak to and she's sharing this, I was, oh my gosh.
It's a wake-up call.
And I stopped and I started researching. And I found someone who's now a friend of mine, Laura McCowan, and she had this blog where she was talking about all these experiences she had where she got a DUI and she went to a wedding and embarrassed her family and all these different things. But it was like, oh my gosh, this person's sharing with me and they're going through the same thing. And what's amazing in hindsight, I'm like, how did I not think anybody else was going through the same thing? But it just opened this world to me of these people are going through the same thing. And then I felt seen. And it was like somebody speaking a language that only I knew. Like somebody all of a sudden is speaking French to somebody that only speaks French and they're in the United States. And they're like, oh my gosh, you know this language too. And it was just this amazing experience.
Wow. So it was sort of like a wake-up call.
Yes.
Interesting. So have you spoken to any professionals or sought professional help, or that was your professional help?
Oh my gosh, I've been in therapy forever. But as far as I did not have to go to detox, I did not go to rehab. What I ended up actually finding was an online support group. Oh, good. It was led by Laura, the one that I had reached out to her. She wasn't as big as she is now. Now she's a best-selling author, but I reached out to her and she emailed me back and forth. But I was able to find support. My body did detox, but I wasn't at a position where it was medically unsafe.
Got it. Yeah.
You could definitely tell that my body was used to running on alcohol. But yeah, I kind of sought my own path that way. And then I've been through different counseling for probably 16 years.
Yeah. Is Chrissie's story typical? Or there's no typical story, but does some of that resonate with your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. It resonates. And yes, it is hard to decide what is typical, but we can think about it from like experiential, and then we can think about it from physical. So like the idea of this anxiety loop, very common, right? So people use alcohol to feel more comfortable because it floods your brain with serotonin. And then when you wake up the next morning, your body is trying to overcorrect, right? It's trying to get back to your normal levels, which feels like withdrawal. So what you took to feel less anxious is now actually making you more anxious. And I'm sure we've all heard the anxiety TikTok trends, right? This idea. So that is very common. I think too, the idea of what purpose is this serving? Not, like you said, it's not just what is the substance, it's like, what is this substance doing for me in my life? So yes, we hear, I think a lot of times, the more extreme examples of, I lost my job and I'm drinking whiskey at 10 a.m. and going to work and I had to go through detox. But especially during the pandemic, I think your example is more common of people's relationship with alcohol changing. And if you look at SAMHSA's stats during 2020 to 2022, alcohol use in everybody, men, women, right, went up.
Wow. Among younger populations too, or just across the board?
Yeah. And we know that, we've mostly been talking about alcohol, but in terms of overdose, we have the highest levels of overdose in this country that we've ever had in the last 2-3 years. They continue to escalate. So it speaks to, right, what is going on around us and what are we doing to try to make it through.
Now, you were rarely or never a binge drinker, right?
Oh, I was a binge drinker in college.
Oh, in college
Absolutely.
you were. Okay. But after that, you weren't. Okay. Or not so much.
My early professional, it depended. It was situational. So I think it's when you talked about environmental and physiological. So one of the things was when I was growing up, alcohol was a communal thing. And for me, happiness and joy was associated with alcohol. I wasn't the one drinking it, but the people around me were more joyous, were happier. So for me, if alcohol was associated with love. So I wanted to bring that into the equation because that meant we were together. Like even if it was just me and my husband at the time, okay, well, let's get a drink because that means we're sharing. That means we're communicating. That means we're spending time together. So there was this association with the substance that made it something I gravitated to as well.
That's really interesting. And so because of that, did you, I almost would say, did peer pressure have an effect on how you drank? But did you at times put peer pressure on others to drink with you because it provided that connection?
In college, I don't know that I had to. Post-college, yeah. And I think, and one of the things that I tell people, because people who have chosen to get sober struggle with pressure and you feel like an outcast, you feel like there's this magnifying glass on you because you're not drinking. And the one thing I'll tell anybody is that anyone that pressures you to drink has an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. No one cares if you're drinking or not if they don't have that relationship. And I was that person too, but you don't think about that. Yeah. You don't say, I'm going to go badger this person. To you, it's like, okay, if they're all drinking, I'm not the outcast. If they're all drinking, it's something we're all doing together. And that's one of the things that our culture and our society fuels. It's not only accepted, it's encouraged. Let's all drink to feel better. Moms, you're stressed? Have some wine. You had a bad day at work? Let's drink. And so it's an easy way to hide in plain sight because everybody's doing it, even to tell yourself, to justify, well, I'm not doing anything that's illegal. I'm not doing anything no one else is doing. Everybody's doing it. So it's not like I have a problem. So it makes it easy to kind of wash away.
That's good. I think this is a perfect segue to asking Brenna the difference between binge drinking, social drinking. How do we know, or how do people know they have a problem? But first, I'm hoping that you can let our viewers know what's the difference, and is there a difference?
Yeah, so social drinking we would think about as, having maybe a glass of wine or a cocktail at like a work event, a party, a birthday party, or even I think social drinking can be at home with your partner, right? It's not just at an event. Binge drinking is defined as 4 to 5 drinks in 2 hours at least once a month. That's like the technical definition of binge drinking. And then in terms of escalating to like the DSM, what's the word I'm looking
I'm sorry,
for?
what's DSM?
I was like, let's make sure we talk about that.
Another acronym.
Didn't know.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, and I'm just
right.
looking at you like, yes, I understand. Okay.
So what we use to diagnose, right, the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. So what we would use to diagnose mental health or substance use. The criteria that you have to meet substance use or alcoholism. A lot of those, and I encourage you to look it up, right? Because you can Google it and you can see what that is. A lot of it is more about, am I going out of my way to obtain? Is it affecting my work? Is it affecting my family? Is it affecting my physical health? Is it affecting my mental health? So I think that we do want to think about not volume, but we want to think about relationship. And I also appreciate the focus on, peer pressure versus culture, because I think we've talked a lot in the past about peer pressure and like, yeah, everyone's going to make you drink when you get to college. It's like, people don't care what you're doing, right? But what does matter is culture. Culture matters. And the culture of, I go to school and that's the first time I get wasted at a frat party. That is the culture of college versus I'm going to go and people are going to shove drinks in my hand and say, you're not cool if you don't do it. So it's much more of this internalized idea of fitting in than somebody saying, here's what you have to do to be cool.
Mm-hmm. That is interesting. But how much does it have to do with family dynamics? Or, you had mentioned it was around you in your environment. Yeah. What's the correlation between alcohol and family?
Well, I think, again, we can kind of separate it. If you look at studies of other countries, for example, where drinking is more prevalent or less prevalent, that has to do with how you are socialized, what the culture of that, what the religion of that country might be, what the family dynamics are. But if we're talking about, I grew up with alcohol being accessible, and so now I drink, I think there's a lot of nuance in there. First of all, maybe that makes you, like, for example, in my family, alcohol was around. And so I had my first drink at home, at Thanksgiving with my parents, not, at Joey's house at 3:00 after school. For me, that was a difference because I had learned to kind of think about it differently before I was exposed to it. So you could say, hey, if you're exposed earlier and someone has a conversation with you that is honest and meaningful, or it's treated as this huge taboo, no, then you're going to go out and try it. I mean, I think from a research perspective, I think that's hard to say. But I do think the most important piece that we've only kind of lightly touched on is trauma, and recognizing that trauma being a framework that we always need to look at addiction through and substance use through. What's going on in the family, right? How did my parents respond to me when I was hurt, when I was traumatized? Did I have to self-medicate?
Yeah.
Those types of things can really show up in the family.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That is interesting. You mentioned binge drinking at a frat party, and some people, some students do that because of trauma and other reasons. How do you, if I have a friend who's drinking heavily, how do I know when they're in trouble? How do I know when they've had too much, or need to take them to the hospital, or just need to take them back to the room and lay them down?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. And first of all, it's 2023. Like, I know y'all Google, so look things up, right? You can do that. But what's important is if somebody is, well, there's some classic signs, right? Are they having trouble breathing? We could think about, like, if you're taking less than 8 breaths per minute, that's irregular breathing. That's trouble breathing. Are they blue? Are they pale? Can you rouse them? If you're saying like, hey, Chrissie, and they're like, whatever. Hey, Chrissie, shake them, sternal rub. Like, don't be afraid to do a sternum rub, which is like knuckles on your breastbone really hard, right? To try to wake somebody up. If somebody's not waking up, you need to call 911. And if somebody is, walking around, falling down, not responding to you, they could be alcohol poisoning, right? I think we get this idea of like, oh, they'll sleep it off. Well, they could sleep it off, or they could, choke on their own vomit when they throw up in the middle of the night and suffocate. Like those are very real things that happen. So err on the side of caution, right? Err on the side of, I want to be able to know that I did everything that I can. And remember that in many states, Michigan included, Good Samaritan laws exist. And so if you are a student and your roommate is overdosing and you call the police, you're not going to be arrested. Mm-hmm. If you see somebody overdosing and you administer Narcan, you cannot be sued.
Okay.
Right? Those are things that
I didn't either.
We want to remember, because people get nervous, right? About, am I going to get in trouble? Or, who am I to say that this is what's needed? But remember that Narcan and naloxone cannot hurt you. If you are not overdosing on opiates, they won't do anything to you. So
and it's best
err on the side of caution.
I love that. And it's best to act rather than leave a person who's in need of health care, right? Yeah, you don't want to live with that pain. I wouldn't want to live with that pain.
No. Yeah. So like breath, color, those are things to look for, and response.
Breath, color,
and response. Oh, I'll just make up my own acronym.
We will make sure our viewers know that one. That's a good one.
I also have a list of resources. If you can link in your show page, I've listed, where to get Narcan and naloxone, signs of alcohol poisoning, a blood alcohol calculator. You can get an app on your phone and calculate your blood alcohol as you're drinking. So you can think about what is your limit, right? And what am I consuming? And some other resources. So I'm happy to link those.
Oh, that's great. That's good. Let's talk about brighter days. So how did your life start to change when you realized there was a problem, that you were going to do something about it? And what's that been like since?
I don't know if that's brighter.
I will. But it's hard, right?
It's brighter now.
It's bright. Okay.
But I will tell, when you remove the substance, you're using the substance to protect yourself from a lot of feelings that are very difficult. And so what happens when you remove the substance is now not only are you facing the feelings that come from withdrawal, and I call it it's like PMS on steroids. Like someone could have offered me a sandwich and I would have started crying. I mean, it was like, and I honestly used to say to people, I haven't cried in months. I don't cry. Oh my gosh, I cry all the time. I cry all the time. Thankfully it's leveled out. Yes. But I mean, for quite a while, I went through this heavy emotional period because I'm facing all these things that I'd been ignoring. It's almost like just keeping them dormant for decades. And so, I've done a lot of inner child work. I've done a lot of trauma-informed work. I'm very passionate about developmental childhood trauma and healing from that. I'll talk to anybody that wants to talk about it as far as my experience and different things like that. I've done a lot of research and looking into it myself. So it's gotten to the point now where I'm starting to become a full-grown person, because we keep flashing back to our childhood stuff when we get triggered, and that can make it to where you're in a professional meeting acting like a 7-year-old, and that's really embarrassing, and it's really it brings up a lot of shame. And so when you're going through this, that's one of the reasons that I started First and Sober on LinkedIn, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I think people don't also want to look at that kind of stuff both on a professional network, and they don't want to be faced with their own ugliness, right? It's kind of something that's difficult to see, but you don't stop being a human because you go into the office and you're triggered by these people who you have no real relationship with, and so they can push your buttons, and all of a sudden you're crying in the office, and wow, this just makes my 41-year-old self look fabulous, And so it's embarrassing, and you have to find a way to heal from that embarrassment, which ironically is showing yourself grace and not being embarrassed, because then you're just, one thing that I heard is, you're just doing what others have done to you when you reject that part of yourself. And so it's been a lot of work in gravitating toward people that are going to care for me and not put me in a bad position, and just learning how to grow from that. So it's going much better.
I remember when I read the first episode of First and Sober, and because like I said, I had no idea that you'd ever had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I just thought, how courageous that was of you to just put yourself out there, not just, and I'm assuming it's a little therapeutic for yourself, but to really help other people, which I'm sure you've done a great deal of. So I really do commend you for that.
I appreciate that.
I respected you even more, which I already had a high level of respect for you.
appreciate that.
But to do that, because it cannot have been easy for you to do.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do want to say, because all of this talk, and we're, in college here, and we're talking about college, I really do want to talk a little bit about safety in college.
Please.
Because this is putting kind of a microscope on my college experience, which I tend to not really do. I kind of skim over that part. But I was lucky I wasn't surrounded by anybody who took advantage of me or put me in a bad spot. But I think when we're young and we think we're invincible, number one, I love what you talked about, not talking necessarily about abstinence, but also informing. Like, let's teach people what hard liquor will do to you versus beer. If you're going to chug hard liquor, you take shots, that's going to affect your body differently than if you're drinking beer. Talk about alcohol proof. Talk about things like that, because if you've never had hard liquor before and you're taking shots, next thing you know, you're blackout drunk and you don't know where you are. There's the physiological safety of you could go into shock or have alcohol poisoning, but you could also put yourself in a compromising position. You don't make quality decisions when you're drinking. And so making sure that you have a safety plan, making sure that you're around the right people you can trust. And as lame as it might be, have somebody that doesn't drink, that hangs around with you so that they can be a voice of reason.
Yep.
Because even when you're not binge drinking, you're trying to make deals with yourself as a grown person that's drinking in their house. I'm not going to drink more than one. And then you have one drink. Your one drink self does not care. So if you're binge drinking, you're certainly not going to make good decisions, especially if you're in your teens and 20s.
That's true.
So I just want to put out there that safety is so important, not only from that physiological standpoint, but because your decision making just completely goes out the window and you can be in these really compromising situations.
Yeah,
Thank
excellent.
you so much for saying that. Yeah, they definitely need
I
it.
would just add, in terms of safety, at EMU in the AED lockers where they have, if someone is going into cardiac arrest, there is Narcan in all of those, and one of those is in every building in EMU. Also, in terms of safety, if you're doing street drugs, test your drugs. Fentanyl is everywhere. I'd much rather that you bought a test kit on Amazon than ended up dead.
I didn't know those
didn't
were
know those were
available.
there.
That's
Absolutely.
a great addition. Thank
So
you.
thinking about, right, is like, yes, here are resources for when you're ready to stop. In the meantime, let's come from a harm reduction model, because we know that statistically that works and that saves lives.
That is
And not going
Really
for the
good.
abstinence too, as a reckless young person. If you're stubborn like myself, when you're told not to do something, that makes you want to do it even more. If you tell a young person, like, well, if you do it, just make sure you stay in these parameters. Maybe you try it and then you don't like it. I actually rejected alcohol until that sophomore drink that I had. And then I said how it made me feel is what turned me onto it. I had no interest in it. And then I was just curious. And then what it did to me physiologically kept me going. But we don't necessarily all want to just be like, I'm going to go, do all the drugs. And then if you don't make it that thing you can't have, it eases that a little bit.
That's a really good point.
Is the word euphoria? Is that the word that, like, how you feel?
Yeah. I mean, I think that is a word that we probably know, but also that is a clinical word as well. It's like, yeah, I feel this feeling of euphoria, lack of inhibitions, right? Those are things that are common. Feeling like you're floating, feeling like you're in a cloud, depending on what substance you're using. But alcohol can absolutely give you a feeling of euphoria.
I'm glad that we hit on safety, because that's a big, big topic on our campus, just making sure that our students, faculty, and staff feel safe. We touched on a little bit of resources, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about the resources that we do have available on campus for students who might be wrestling, with alcoholism. Where can they turn?
Yeah, so I also have a link to the official EMU document that lists a lot of local resources through county, which is very helpful. But in general, CAPS, right, is somewhere that you can go as a student. That the University Health Center is somewhere that you can go. The clinic, the training clinic that we have is somewhere that you can go if you are, we do see people with substance use issues, but more about like that anxiety, that depression, having trouble transitioning, things that are happening in your life. If you notice that you're drinking more, that you're isolating more, that you're having a hard time making connections, come see us, come talk to us. That's what we're there for. It's there for students and it's free. And we really want to offer those services and get people started with therapy and being comfortable with therapy while they're here instead of waiting. We want to be proactive versus reactive. So how do we get people to start coming in and talking about some of those things that they're experiencing?
Absolutely. And we'll put a lot of the resources on the screen. So,
great.
Students will have them for sure. Any last words, anything else you want to share with us?
Lolita, before our last words, I just want to talk about Chrissie and her career.
Yes.
She came in. Yeah. You're doing really, really well. And so can you talk about what you're doing now, other than I know that you feel empowered sharing your story and people are asking you to share your story, which is wonderful. But what are you doing after graduation?
Oh, goodness.
What aren't you doing?
I know, it really is. So when I graduated, I wanted to work in sports, as you know, and I ended up working for the Detroit Lions for 10 years. Interestingly enough, I am this old. I started working there before social media existed. So I was overseeing a very antiquated website, but I've always been a writer and a storyteller. That's always been my passion. So when social media started, it was another way for me to express myself and express things on behalf of an organization. I actually got to head up their social, and I was the point person for their social with an NFL team. So if you can imagine nowadays where we have social, I was actually with an NFL team during a period where they were like, all right, we need to talk about to our owners about this Facebook thing. And we're not sure if we want to be on it. And now it's like, oh, okay, right. So once I left the Lions in 2014, I ended up partnering with a former NFL player, Herman Moore. He was a wide receiver during the 90s. I won't talk about how old I was in the 90s. And then I started my own business. It was kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, what do I do well? I need to start a business, I need to do something. So I was in consulting. I did LinkedIn consulting, and then that's evolved into, he and I are now partnered in a company called Stack Brands. And we're focused on entrepreneurship, on e-commerce. And then I'm also COO for Team 84 LLC, which is his long-standing company. He's a serial entrepreneur, so I just have to chase him and like try to figure out how to implement the things that he has all these ideas about. And we're getting ready to launch a product called Herman Low, which is his kind of passion project for his very close friend, Lomas Brown, who's another Detroit Lions alum.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you for asking.
No problem.
I'm so
you
glad
just
that you
light
did that.
up, and it just makes me light up because I love everything you
Chrissie
say.
is my hero. When she was working for the Lions, and I tell this story sometimes, I don't know if you remember, but you brought me in, took me into the cafeteria, and I have never seen chairs so wide. And on the middle of every table, there was a hot sauce bottle about this big. It was very interesting and very fun. So I have had so much fun following you in your career, and you're just amazing.
Thank you. And I have to tell you, this would be my last thought. So, my college career was not the greatest. And when I look back on it, I actually have a lot of grief because I feel like there's what could have been. I don't think there's any way that I could have avoided the unhealthy experience I had just because of where I was in life. I wasn't about to like leap and bound healing in 3 months. But you were really a bright spot for me, a huge bright spot for me. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
And when I think back on college, like you really stand out as a big piece that was, that made it worthwhile and wonderful. And you haven't aged either. And
She hears that all the time,
which is really
Fabulous.
impressive. But yeah, I mean, you treated me with such respect and as a real person, and I'm actually going to cry. And
I know. I'm fighting back tears.
but you did. You treated me as a real person. You saw me, so.
I love you.
I appreciate that.
I appreciate
I
you.
do.
I really do. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. Oh my gosh. I got nothing left. You just go ahead.
I know. How do we end on that note? Well, we want to thank you both for sharing your story. And I know that it'll help our viewers, our listeners. So thank you. We appreciate you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
And Brenna, we appreciate you. Welcome
Thank
you to EMU.
Thank you.
And any parting words?
I would just add, like, that story, right? We talk so much about self-care, but let's not forget about communal care. Like, let's take care of each other. And so when I think about students, I think about friends, I think about family, I think about, right? We want you alive. Let's take care of each other. This would be my parting words.
You never know who you're impacting.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Right. And such a beautiful and perfect example, right? Of feeling alone, but someone was there.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you both so
Thank
much
you.
for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. We really do appreciate your support. And remember, we would love to welcome you here with us. If you have a story you'd like to tell, or even a topic you'd like us to discuss, email us at the address on the screen.
Now, with that said, we will see you again around the 15th of next month on all of your favorite podcast platforms, as well as EMU's YouTube channel. So please look for us, tell your friends, like us, share us, but most of all, please be safe this holiday season. Blackout Wednesday is coming around, and we just want you to be safe. Drink in moderation if you can, and let someone know if you need help, but most of all, be safe, and we'll see you soon.